We were assassination squads. Our targets were villages. We'd go in the middle of the night and drag them out of their house and either abduct them or assassinate them. In general, we were at that squad.
The bitter civil war between North and South Vietnam was the biggest conflict the CIA ever entered. A civilian organization found itself embroiled in all the horrors of hand-to-hand killing and torture.
We're supposed to be pretty sure about the location of our target. And we're not sure, then we'll take the next hut to the right and the next hut to the left. Sometimes we even hit the wrong village. If we hit our photo of the man and it was already marked for termination, which was a little red stripe, it wasn't top of their dossier, he was a walking corpse. As soon as you go into the door, you start firing. Boom, 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 like that. Anything that moved was dead. Shoot them as you find them. I don't see their faces. I don't see their intentions. I don't know if they're armed or not. I'm going, God, I'm playing God here.
The CIA correctly judged the courage and ruthlessness of their enemy. It learned from them and saw that conventional warfare would not win. Out of this came the Phoenix program.
Horror, nightmares, long line of crosses. That's what Phoenix is all about.
Tet is the Vietnamese New Year. During celebrations like this in February 1968, Viet Cong guerrillas and the North Vietnamese army were to gain a propaganda victory that proved a turning point in the war. Under cover of the festivities, they launched a massive attack on the South, even infiltrating the U.S. Embassy in Saigon.
The war came to Saigon early in the morning of January 31st. The first target was the symbol of the American presence in Vietnam, the United States Embassy.
Although a propaganda victory, Tet was a military defeat for the communists.
Described as a commando suicide squad. They had slipped into Saigon in trucks filled with flowers.
Both sides now recognized that conventional warfare would not win. The best hope of avoiding defeat, the CIA thought, was to match guerrillas with guerrillas.
The CIA said this is not a normal kind of a war. It is a people's war. It must be fought at the political level and not by large numbers of forces and large amounts of bombers. So that you had two levels of war, a formal military one and a guerrilla one. And I've been a guerrilla myself, and I know the problems of a guerrilla. But the way you prevent guerrillas is you organize the people so that they resist the guerrillas, and then the guerrillas fade away.
The communists had expected their Tet attack to achieve victory, and they made this propaganda film showing how they'd prepared for it. Instead, the CIA learned from the communists and applied their techniques against them in the Phoenix program. Phoenix was created and advised by the CIA, but largely carried out by special South Vietnamese teams. The plan was to identify, capture, interrogate, and if necessary, kill the people running the undercover war, the Viet Cong command structure.
The CIA essentially initiated the process of trying to understand the secret communist apparatus in South Vietnam, what we later called the Phoenix program, of trying to gather together the bits and pieces of information. Who is the local tax collector? Who is the chairman of the district committee of the communists and so forth, so that they become people and we understand who they are. Then you can focus on either trying to capture them, getting them to defect, or, if necessary, shooting them. The cutting edge of the battle was going to be at night in those rural communities. And if those communities could win their own safety, the communists were defeated.
The Mekong Delta. When Phoenix began, the countryside was already scarred by the war's bloody progress. The CIA's decision to enter the war at village level was to choose a lesser evil. The terrible paradox of Phoenix was that although it is known for bringing murder and torture to the country, it was more effective and caused less death than conventional warfare. A first step for the Phoenix program was to make the villages safe against Viet Cong terror.
I recall one particular province chief who was a brilliant fellow. One of the reasons for his success was that when they captured a member of the apparatus, he would bring him into his home and have him to dinner and talk with him and try to learn what he was thinking. Why did he become this communist rebel?
The name of this province chief was Tran Ngoc Chau.
I remember that William Colby came at least twice to observe my experimental programs. The CIA looked at my work with a very scientific eye. I felt that nobody had studied the enemy properly. In Vietnam, the enemy were amongst the ordinary Vietnamese peasants living and working in the countryside. At certain times, some of them worked for the communist side. We needed to find out who they were and try to convert them to our side. My hope, my happiness, was to see people convert from communism to nationalism. But for those that absolutely refused, I must use strong measures. As a last resort, I set up 3-man counter-terror teams to kill or assassinate those communists causing trouble in my province, just as the communists were killing our people. The CIA provided weapons, explosives, and communications equipment for these teams. They also gave us money to reward the teams. For example, £20 for killing a Viet Cong village official, £30 if you killed a district officer. Yes, I cannot deny that I was the father of the Phoenix program.
Chau's ideas were given form at the Vung Tau training camp, where special teams were schooled under the eye of the CIA.
Each 59-man team is composed of one team leader, one psychological warfare man, one intelligence man.
The Phoenix training camps were quite separate from the U.S. military command. The person in charge of the operation was given ambassadorial rank. In February 1968, it was Robert Comer.
The agency always impressed me as the most knowledgeable and competent agency in Vietnam. The CIA had been thinking about this program for years. And when I asked for suggestions as to how we get at the infrastructure, the CIA came up with the only ideas. State had none. and the military had none. And their intelligence on the BCI was, to put it shrewdly, zero. Frankly, I thought to devise a program to use the BC's own techniques to beat them. They were conducting a terror campaign, so I felt we had to conduct a counter-terror campaign to kill the BC assassins. And we did.
I came here simply because I believe firmly that this program is our last chance to save this country.
In the camps, training was helped by advisors from the CIA and US Special Forces. The job of the Phoenix program teams was to beat the Viet Cong at their own game. Against communist ideology, they pitched Vietnamese tradition and myth.
We have the dragon as the force of the matter and the fairy as the force of the spirit. So dragon and fairy is matter plus the spirit. So this is, in essence, what we try to give them.
Ralph McGehee was posted to Saigon just after the 1968 Tet attack. He worked with the Phoenix program. It was to be a turning point in his 25-year career with the CIA.
I was recruited to be in the CIA after a football career at the University of Notre Dame. It was recruiting footballers because it was heavily involved in paramilitary operations in Korea, in Germany, beginning in Vietnam. And for their paramilitary operations, they want athletic young men.
Notre Dame leads 33-0 at halftime.
We were taught how to jump out of airplanes with parachutes. We're given map reading training, small weapons firing, dirty fighting. I like to call it dirty fighting, how to kill with a garrote around the neck, with this part of your hand, the fleshy part of your hand extended, and hitting upward through right here to crush the bone into your brain, the person's brain. And of course, using a knife, coming from behind and pulling the knife across the throat, using other implements that would appear to be innocent but could be used for murdering people. When I joined the agency, I was a right-wing Cold Warrior and looked at the communist movement as sort of Antichrist out to destroy the world. However, when I came out to Vietnam, my own ideological house of cards sort of collapsed on me, and I began to see the program, I think, in the proper perspective. It was a murder program, an assassination program, designed to force the people to accept an American-controlled government.
Torchlit ceremonies marked the end of training at Vung Tau camp. From here, the special teams went to operate in the countryside. Their war was heartless. Close-knit family structures and the Vietnamese tradition of retribution made murder, torture, and vendetta commonplace. Some Vung Tau graduates formed provincial reconnaissance units. They became prime targets for Viet Cong terror, just as the Viet Cong were prime targets for theirs.
The program was designed, set up, funded, trained, and managed by the CIA. And the program was designed to use all intelligence assets that the agency had set up in the country to feed into central points. And from that point, the agency then determined the targets for capture or assassinations. And one of the more distressing aspects of it all, there were quotas established for people who would either be turned around or to be captured or killed. I regard the Phoenix program as being a war crime. Of course, the strong are never convicted of war crimes.
The provincial reconnaissance units were the often brutal strike arm of the CIA's Phoenix concept.
I was the conceptual father of the Phoenix program. My considered opinion is that the Phoenix program was quite effective. And if something like Phoenix had been adopted earlier, could have turned the tide of the war. My priorities were intelligence priorities. First of all, recruit. If you can't do that, defect. If you can't do that, capture. If you can't do that, kill them.
To operate with the Phoenix teams in the countryside and jungles of Vietnam, men from the U.S. Special Forces were also recruited, particularly American Asians who could pass as Vietnamese.
And I consider myself a warrior, you know, from the warrior class. Both on the Chinese side and the Apache side, I'm a warrior. From warrior stock, but there was no honor in my war. It's kind of hard to accept, you know, yeah. Then from a soldier to be an assassin for hire. And then from an assassin for hire to be a murderer, you know. This is about 3 different things that you can do, and they're all the same thing. I was not a murderer, but I think I was an assassin for hire, yes, I was one. The playing cards were like a warning sign. It was like just to show, or like almost like a calling card. It was like a calling card, just to let them know who did it. My favorite card was the Ace of Spades, but the Joker was really the favorite. Right? I thought that was a big joke on me and on them and on everybody. War to us at that point is a game of chance. You know, you're gambling not money, but you're gambling yourself. You either get killed or you get hurt very bad. First, we will get a photo of the man or some kind of drawings, you know, the kind of drawings they have on police stations. And if we couldn't really find this person, we'll get somebody that looks like him and bring him back. And most of the times you cannot really carry a corpse for miles at a time. So one of the most, which is a very Southeast Asian thing to do, was to just bring the head back to prove that you got him. Intimidation is what Phoenix was all about. It was shock, intimidation. In a sense, we were terrorists. Instead of being counter-terrorists, we were terrorists.
You are familiar with the controversy over the Phoenix program in Vietnam. There have been allegations that, in effect, this Phoenix program was an assassination program. What are the facts?
Mr. Chairman, I've testified in extenso on this subject.
At the end of 1968, William Colby took over responsibility for Phoenix from Robert Comer. In congressional hearings beginning 2 years later, he defended the program.
How many, roughly, would you estimate were eliminated?
I believe that the figures in mid-71 that were testified to at that time were that some 28,000 had been captured, some 20,000 had been killed, and some 17,000 had actually rallied by that time. The Phoenix program... I figured it was my job to defend it, to defend the reality of it, not to whitewash it, to say it never did anything wrong. I thought that would be a disaster. And yet, to try to explain the nature of the situation we were facing, and that in a war, blood does get let. sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly. But you try to make it right as often as you possibly can and wrong as seldom as you possibly can.